Okay, so on 4.1, we're going to be multiplying polynomials. A polynomial is the sum of monomials, so it's more than one term, is what a polynomial means. So notice on number 1 and number 2, we have two terms, which is called a binomial times another binomial. So what you will be using when you have a binomial times a binomial is FOIL, which means you'll multiply the first terms together, the outside terms together, inside, and last. Okay, so that's what you'll use anytime you're multiplying two binomials. So I'm going to multiply my first two terms together. So 4x times 3x would be 12x squared. Your outside terms, 4x times a negative 2 would be a negative 8x. And then your inside, 1 times 3x would be 3x. And then your last terms, 1 times a negative 2 would be a negative 2. Okay, so then you're going to combine like terms. Once you use FOIL, most of the time you have like terms that you can combine. Right here we have a 12x squared. If you do not have another x squared, you're not going to be able to combine it with anything. So I'm going to bring down the 12x squared. And then I'm going to combine the x's here. That's a negative 8x plus 3x, which would equal negative 5x. And then you have minus 2. Notice we're not able to combine anything else, so that would be our answer there. Okay, so same thing on number 2. We have a binomial times a binomial, so we'll start out with multiplying the first terms together. So that would be 5x squared. The outsides, which would be negative 10x. Insides would be negative 3x. And then your outsides would be positive 6. What do you need to do?
Grab my notebook. Okay, I need a pass round. So you did notebook.
I'm recording right now, so.
Oh, sorry.
We're going to combine like terms. So you have 5x squared. When you combine your x's, you get negative 13x plus 6. Just grab one of my action boxes. And so that would be your answer there. So anytime you have a binomial times a binomial, you'll use FOIL. Notice 3 and 4 are a little different because we have two terms, but then we're multiplying it by 3 terms. So we're still going to be kind of doing the same thing as FOIL, except you will have a third term that you will have to multiply by. So we're going to distribute x times x squared, which would give you x cubed. We're going to distribute x to 3x, which would give you 3x squared, and x to a negative 1, which is a negative x. So we distributed this first term to all 3 of these. Now we'll do the same thing, except we'll use the second term. So 2 times x squared is 2x squared. 2 times 3x is 6x. And 2 times a negative 1 is a negative 2. Once we're done with using or multiplying them together, we need to combine like terms. So notice that I have an x cubed here, and there's not another x cubed, so I need to bring it down. And then I have a 3x squared. I need to combine that with the other x squared, so that's 2x squared. When I add those, that gives me 5x squared. And I like to cancel out as I'm combining them, so that way I know what I have left. Then we have a negative 1x plus 6x, which would equal positive 5x. And then we have left that minus 2 that we will bring down. We're not able to combine any more terms, so that would be your answer. Okay, so number 4, notice we have 2 terms and then we're multiplying it by 3 terms. So we'll do what we did on number 3. We'll take the first term and multiply by all 3 of those that second polynomial, and then multiply negative 4 times all 3 of these. Okay, so x times x squared is x cubed. X times 4x is 4x squared. X times 16 is 16x. So we finished multiplying everything by x. Now I need to look. Now notice here, this is a negative 4. So negative 4 times x squared would give you a negative 4x squared. Negative 4 times 4x would be a negative 16x. And negative 4 times 16 will give you a negative 64. All right, combining like terms, we have an x cubed, but notice there's not another x cubed, so I'm just going to bring it down. And then I have a 4x squared. Notice we have another x squared, but it's negative 4x squared. So 4 minus 4 is 0. So those actually cancel out. You don't need to write 0x squared. Then we have 16x minus 16x. Those will also cancel out to 0. So you need to bring down your minus 64. So x cubed minus 64 would be your answer there. Okay, so now notice that we're going to multiply these next ones mentally. So without using FOIL, we have a binomial times a binomial. Anytime your first terms have a single variable, single meaning it's just like an x, okay, so by itself. Then you're able to use this method, okay? So in order to get your first term, you're going to multiply your two variables together. So that's going to give me an x squared. In order to get your middle term, you're going to add these two numbers that are inside your parentheses. So what's 3 minus 2? That will give you a positive 1. You need to put an x with that middle term. And then to get your last term, you're going to multiply those two numbers, which will give you a negative 6. If you had used FOIL, after combining like terms, you should have ended up with x squared plus x minus 6, so the same answer. Okay? That only works whenever you have a single variable. So we're going to do the same thing on number 6. So I multiply these together to give me x squared. I'm going to add these two numbers together to get your middle term. Negative 4 plus 4 gives you 0. So you will not have that middle term with that x. You multiply these and you get negative 16. So x squared minus 16 would be your answer. All right, I'll do a couple more here and then you can try the rest. So notice these are single variables. So I'm going to get an x squared for my first term. And I add these two terms, negative 1 plus 8. That gives me 7. Your middle term always needs to have your variable, so the x. Then when you multiply these together, you get negative 8. You could use FOIL. You should end up with the same thing after you combine like terms. Okay, so number 8, you get x squared. You add those two numbers, which would give you 15. Remember to put an x with that middle term. And then you're multiplying to get that last term, which will give you 54. Okay, so now you can try 9, 10, and 11. All right, let's look at the back. So 12. Notice we have an x plus 3 squared. Anytime you're squaring a term or terms, you're multiplying it by itself. So this means the same thing as x plus 3 times x plus 3. Notice both of those variables are single, so we could use the same method that we learned on those last few that we just went over. So we're going to get x squared. Adding those two numbers, you get 6x. Multiplying them, you get plus 9. Anytime you have a binomial squared, which means two terms and then you're squaring that, you should end up with 3 terms for your answer. Every single time you have a binomial squared. 3 terms. You're not just going to square x and 3 and that's your answer. You will always have 3 terms. Okay, so 13. It's squared, so you're just multiplying it by itself. Notice these are not single variables. These are a 2x and a 2x. This is a 1x and a 1x. Those are single. Okay, so we're not able to use this method that we did on those last couple of examples on the front. Okay, so what you will have to do is either use FOIL, but there's also a shorter way. Okay, if you have a binomial squared, what you can do is you can square that first term. Make sure you square the 2 and the x. So that would be 4x squared. You can multiply these two terms inside your parentheses, so 2x minus 1 would give you a negative 2x, but you would have 2 of those, so you would need to times it by 2. which would give you a negative 4x. And then you would have to square that negative 1, which would give you a positive 1. If you had used FOIL, it would have gave you the same answer after you combine like terms. Okay? So 14, let's do the same method that we just did on 13. You have a binomial squared. You can square the first term, which is x squared. You can multiply these together, which would give you negative 5x. But if you were using FOIL, you would end up with 2 of those. So you need to multiply 2 times that negative 5x, which would give you negative 10x. And then you're going to square that last term, which would give you a positive 25. Okay, so 15. It's a binomial squared, so I can square the first term. Don't forget to square 3 and x, so that would be 9x squared. Then you're going to multiply these together, which would give you 6x, but you have to times it by 2 to give you 12x. And then you're squaring that last term, which is plus 4. If you had wrote this out as 3x plus 2 times 3x plus 2 and used FOIL, you would have ended up with the same answer that I have here after you combine my terms. So you can use either method there. All right, so I'll try 2 of them and then you can do those last 2. So I have a binomial squared, so I can square this first term, multiply these together, which is a negative 4x. Don't forget to double it, so that would make negative 8x. And then you can square that term, which is a positive 16. Again, if you don't like that method, then you can just use FOIL, x minus 4 times x minus 4. But remember, anytime you have a binomial squared, you should end up with 3 terms. Okay, so I'm going to square 2x, so that's 4x squared. I'm going to multiply these together, which is a negative 10x, but I have to times it by 2, so that's a negative 20x. And then I'm going to square negative 5, which is a positive 25. And then you can try these last 2.